My name is Noeleen McDonald. I'm a soils researcher with the Chocolate Agricultural Catchments Programme, located in Johnson and Castle, County Wexford. The Agricultural Catchments Programme that I'm going to speak to you today about is kind of giving an introduction about what it's trying to achieve, which is the win-wins in farm intensification and improved water quality. And this programme is funded by the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. So just kind of the Agricultural Catchments Programme, or ACP to what I refer to maybe a couple of times in this presentation, has many objectives. But mainly my primary objective is it was set up to scientifically evaluate the effectiveness of the Nitrates Action Programme measures and also the Water Framework Directive Programme measures. And this is to look at the loss of nutrients of nitrogen and phosphorus from agriculture and to protect them against losses to water quality. And also, the evaluation of these measures are also then used in terms of any modifications of these measures going forward. And this is particularly evident in this year where it's actually under current review. It's also worth mentioning that while we also look at the biophysical impact of these measures on the landscape, the programme also incorporates a socio-economic evaluation of these measures on the economy of farming industry and also the attitudes in terms of farmers in taking up these measures. So what was our main driver? So initially at the start and also still at the forefront, our initial driver of the programme was environmental. So like other member states, Ireland also had to evaluate the effectiveness of these measures. And also the Nitrates Directive comes under the umbrella of the Water Framework Directive that is there to ensure we improve and maintain the water quality status. But things kind of changed since the programme was implemented back in 2008. There's been other things, and economics has come into the forefront of it as well. And through strategy documents, such as the revised one, which is Foodwise 2025, which links in that we want to increase the economic output of produce from farming, but in a sustainable way. So, boosting on this green image that is being incorporated in producing products from agriculture in Ireland. And part of that sustainability is improving and maintaining our water quality. So what are these measures that I talked about? And sometimes they're referred to as GAP measures, which are good agricultural practice measures. So there are three main areas that the measures are there. The three areas is that there's from point source. So the measures that were put in kind of to maintain kind of losses from agricultural farmland was that you have to have on farms a minimum storage capacity, and these can range depending where you are on the country from 16 to 22 weeks. And these usually coincide with the winter period when you're spreading. Also, to constrain incidental losses, there is measures there that are buffer zones from nutrients being applied to water courses or lakes or extraction points. And also there's a closed period there for ahead of time in applying nutrients to land. And this is usually in the winter period where it's most risky in terms of nutrient loss. There is measures in there to restrict diffuse losses. So this is basically where you have really high levels of nutrients in the soils, and the measures there are restrictions to stocking limits. Usually it's about 170 kilograms of organic emission per hectare. What that is like 2 cows per hectare. But because Ireland is such a vast, it's made up mostly of grassland, we're grassland-driven kind of agriculture, we have a derogation in terms of we can increase our stocking rate once we're primarily producing on grassland, and this can go up to around 2.5 cows per hectare, which is 250. We also have a cap on fertiliser rates to match basically the crop requirement, and also there's a limit there in terms of where soils are deemed to have already excessive levels of phosphorus, we're not allowed to apply more nutrients. So those are the measures. So I've outlined what measures that we're there looking at, and I've outlined kind of the drivers and why we're there. So we get down to the programme then, since it's been in action and where it's been. So we have 6 catchments located in Ireland. We have 2 in the southeast, 2 in the northwest, 1 in the west of Ireland and Mayo, and 1 then in the southwest. So just to go in a little bit more detail, what the first kind of catchment there that's in Louth in the northeast is Dunleer. We call it arable A. It's actually got probably slightly more grassland than it has trees. But why we call it arable B, I should say, and this is kind of a reference that we have in our publications to see where the catchment is. Why we call it arable is because for where it is, it has a high density of tillage on a poor to moderately drained soil type. So it's kind of, these catchments were set up, I should say, to kind of have differences in land use, soil type and intensities, because they'll all have a variation in different risks to nutrient loss. The next one in the northeast is a kind of a merger of kind of two sub-catchments, which is Shrewsbury and Cardiff, located in the drumlins of Monaghan. And we have a lake in this catchment that we're monitoring, as well as a stream in Cardiff, that part of the catchment. It's mainly grassland, and it will be on 40 kind of draining soils. In the west of Ireland, then, this is actually our largest catchment. This is 30 square kilometres. It's located in Mayo. It's mainly grassland, but the difference with this is it's well drained with kind of the thin layer soils and harsh limestone bedrock. So, perceived when we started off, this would have been perceived to be a particularly risky catchment in terms of nutrients. The next catchment then in near Clonakilty in Cork in the southwest is Timoleague. This is mainly grassland, some tillage, but mainly grassland. It's well drained soils, and this is a very intensive catchment in terms of production. When I spoke earlier of derogation type farms where you have high stock levels, a lot of the farms within this catchment will be very highly stocked, and they're mainly dairy. Bringing down then to the southeast in County Wexford, we have our Arabella, which is our Castle catchment. It's mainly tillage, there's some grassland. Until recently we had our first dairy farmer in this catchment, mainly tillage, and it's on well-drained soils. And then, not too far away from it, but contrasting catchment, not too far away from that one, also in Wexford, is Ballycanoe. And it's grassland, small bit of tillage, maybe in slightly rarer drained soils, but it's predominantly a poorly drained soil type in this catchment. So, when the programme was initiated, in order to robustly scientifically evaluate the gap measures, we implemented an experimental design across all the catchments. And what the experimental design that was agreed upon was this nutrient transfer continuum. So what this was kind of looking at everything starting at the source, so the nutrients that were applied, the nutrients that were in the soils themselves, looking at how these nutrients were then becoming mobilised, the pathways that they were taking, were they going down through the soil drainage, were they overland flow, the delivery then in terms of the nutrient concentrations that were ending up in the groundwater, the streams and lakes, and then the impact then these nutrients were having on the ecology within these watercourses. So, in terms of kind of what we did and how we went about evaluating this nutrient transfer continuum, a whole catchment audit in terms of instrumentation and data collection was done at the source and the delivery points. There were some demonstration studies and further kind of subsequent PhD studies done in mobilisation pathways to give us a better understanding of what was driving them. But as I mentioned before in our objectives, what we also did is not just from the biophysical aspect of things, we also carried out socio-economic audits in terms of understanding the economic outcomes that were occurring on these farms due to the measures, and also the attitudes in terms of farmers in terms of the adoption of these measures. So this here is just a picture of one of our catchments, the Tillage Castle catchment, and just gives you an indication of the level of implementation and analysis that have been going on since 2008. All the fields in the area we had collected soil samples from, actually from a resolution of 2 hectares, and sometimes it wasn't just the whole field, it could have been soil sampling for about 3 or 4 different splits in the field, reflecting nutrient records. Within the catchment we also have a met station set up in the centre. At the top of the watershed of the catchment we have rain gauges. We have monitoring multi-well sites in different hill slope intersections across some areas. We also have, right down at the bottom, at the end of the watershed, where all the water is coming out, we have our mini lab, our mini outdoor lab as we like to call it. That's basically monitoring on high temperature resolution. Nearly about every 10 minutes it's taking a sample and it's monitoring for the nutrients that are in the stream. And that's that blue square there you see, just where the man is standing there, he's taking the lower. So there's a huge amount of data that's being gathered on these catchments, and also there's ecology surveys that are happening and snapshots that are happening along the stream waters area. So this is being implemented across all our catchments, and we have a large team in terms of about 16 or 17 people on the programme, researchers, advisors on the ground working with farmers, and also technicians out in the field gathering information and maintaining the equipment. So as I said, it's a common experimental design. we're doing it from a social and biophysical aspect. And also, this basically is because of all the catchments that we have, essentially in partnership with 320 farmers that spreads out these catchments. This is just a picture of what is said there at the bottom of the watershed of our little green kiosk area. That's our outdoor lab. And this is the weir that was put in place to slow down the movement of water and be able to take a suction sample coming out. And this is our high-tech outdoor lab that's continuously run on a sub-area basis. And these are kind of the level of parameters that we're looking for in the stream water. So, most of the time, in terms of really sort of understanding what we're trying to investigate and look at, most of the time the nutrients will stay where we kind of want them to be. However, they're influenced in terms of their loss by management, by landscape, and by climate. And certainly when transport and nutrients come together, that's when you start having this risky area in terms of nutrient loss. So certainly we do have a lot of challenges, so that's just one aspect of it. Challenges in such as climate, and challenges such as the variability of soil types that we have in Ireland, within our catchments, on our farms as well, that we have to kind of contend with to get a better understanding of where the nutrients come from. So it's a certain challenge that we have in balancing the targets that we set in the nitrates directive, but also the production and profitability targets that we have as well. So my last two slides, I'm just going to give you a taster of what we have been finding in terms of are we being able to achieve these win-wins, and certainly what are the things that we're trying to consider in terms of how we can get on to achieve these win-wins. So firstly, from colleagues of mine in Teagasc and also the catchments programme, what we have found is, from actually not just the catchments programme, but from the national data set, is that in the last 10 years, use efficiency of these nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen, have actually improved over the years, particularly on dairy farms. They've increased. So certainly you have less nutrients that are there in the system that can be lost. And this is good for greenhouse gas aspect too. We found that farmers there's a positive impact in terms of their adoption of practice change. So what we're seeing is they're tending to apply their nutrients at times when the growth of the grass, the crop, most demanded. So for example, the spring applications, such as this time of the year, where they're going to get better value out of their manures and terms of nutrients. We find that both in our catchments and nationally that the soils that have high soil high nutrient levels, such as phosphorus, are declining. And we're also seeing that the close period that was put in place in terms of the risky time for nutrient loss is effective. So when we kind of boil all those kind of things that we're starting to see in a case study in terms of just looking at one of our catchments, and we looked at across that experiment design from source to impact. For example, the Trinity catchment was our intensif catchment. We found that we can achieve those win-wins. In that catchment, we find that they're changing their practices. The surplus levels of phosphorus are declining. So we're not going to that, then the level of phosphorus that were in the pathways that we could see was also declining. Now we did see kind of tentative declines in terms of stream feed concentrations. The thing to remember is there's a lag basically. When you first implement something, it's going to take a while, and particularly from in terms of nature in itself, it's going to take a while to see that basically evident when you get down closer to stream, when you get down to ecology. So we're starting to see signs of improvement. And the win-wins then being from the environmental then to the production point of view is that these farmers in this catchment were still producing milk that was comparable to the top 10% of overall national producers. So, bringing on further, what else are we seeing in our catchments? Well, we see our average levels of nitrates in the stream groundwater are below the WHO drinking limit. In terms of phosphorus loads, when you compare to international standards, they're low to moderate. However, we do note that 3 of our catchments actually have phosphorus that are above our Irish standards. The thing that is becoming most recent and evident from our studies, and actually they correspond to other catchments in other countries such as France and Norway that are on the Atlantic kind of coastal regions of Europe, that the weather cycles are starting to have a pattern, and these need to have be wary in terms of policy review, because they're starting to override climate pressures and nutrient losses. So these are something that are starting to become more considered in terms of when we're looking at these measures. Is it kind of more something that's out of our control? We also find that things to be aware of when we're looking at how long it will take for these measures to be impactful. There's a lag, kind of mentioned there. There's a lag in our soils, which takes 12 20 years from some of our soils to drop in high nutrient levels. In the streams, in the groundwater as well, for example, it can take 20 years as well, or 21 years, for enriched nitrate in groundwater to drop below standards. And as well, there's other influencing factors on the likes of ecology as well, not just with nutrients, that could be preventing them from recovering. And the implementation of measures as well. While from a social aspect is stopping full implementation or better implementation of these measures to give us kind of the gains that we need. So yes, so what we've seen today is, the gap measures implementation is not complete, not overly complete. More gains can be made. So what we feel is that from advisory on the ground support for farmers, it needed. And we see that this is kind of a short to long term kind of improvement that we need. Keep going with the gap measures that we have. Invest more time into advisors that can spend with them better nutrient management planning from an agronomic and environmental point of view. Enhance, kind of improvement towards efficiencies in farms, so uptake of new innovations and technologies that can improve efficiency across the board. Gains in terms of breeding has seen a knock-on effect in improving nutrient use efficiency. And certainly what we also know as well is that sometimes these measures aren't going to be enough because there's just things that they cannot fix in the landscape. There is hotspots of areas that could be 10% of an area actually causing all the problems. What can we do? Can we identify these 10% of the areas and further target them measures to those 10% of the areas to give us our gains? So certainly those are just some of the things that we've seen. I would invite you all to visit our website for more information. There's a lot more publications coming out of this programme in different areas, and there's a lot more information there as well. I'd like to acknowledge farmers in our programme, my ACP colleagues and team, and the Shops colleagues, and thank you very much for listening.